come to the Vintage Computer Festival at the Enter Museum to see the evolution of From the Hole to the Cloud.
and the MiniDisc is only 65. So you couldn't really store that much information on it. Compared to a regular 700 megabyte CD, a MiniDisc would be about 140 megabytes. So if you wanted to store the same amount of music, so for example, 74 minutes of music as you would on a regular audio CD, you had to compress this data. And for this, Sony developed a proprietary audio codec, which they called adaptive transform acoustic codec, which we probably known more broadly as ATRAC. So each ATRAC encoded on the MiniDisc is 424 bytes, so it's 212 for the left channel and right channel. And if we compare it to the same amount of uncompressed audio that would be stored on a CD, we arrive at a compression ratio of about 5:1. This enabled the relatively small or physically small MiniDisc to store a comparable amount of data. You might be interested, is this compression any good? So contemporary at the time, I think 1991 was the first release of the MP3 codec. So this is somewhat released at the same time. And they compare, I think it was quite competitive to at least the initial releases of MP3 at the time. Later, Sony introduced higher compression ratios, so you could fit more music on your CD. And if you're actually interested to see how it sounds, we have a live demo at our exhibit, so you can just pick an album, put it in a mini CD player, and see how it sounds, and see if you can tell if the compression is there or not. And I'm already in my mid-30s, so my hearing is not as good as it was when I was young, but I cannot really tell the difference for the 5:1 compression ratio. It becomes more evident at higher compression ratios, but they were usually meant for storing speech. For example, MiniDisc also had a niche within reporters in Japan who would you could plug in a microphone directly into a MiniDisc recorder and use this for your work. So you could, and I should also probably mention that here I will be talking about mostly MiniDisc players as in kind of portable devices, kind of like Walkmans you could take with you on your trip. But Sony over the time introduced a whole variety of factors for this format. So you had deck players, you had bookshelf players, you had boomboxes, you had car audio, and so on. So there was a little bit of diversification in the product range as well. So this is again what I just showed you expressed in a scheme. So we have 36 sectors which form one cluster, and within that we have 32 sectors for data, and we have 4 additional sectors for like metadata. Each sector is 2352 bytes of data, and if within each sectors you have 11 sound groups, and sound group is what's like the smallest logical unit for the ATRAC codec to encode. So within a sound group you have basically 512 samples corresponding from the left and right channel. So in many ways the data format is also similar to the one used or is defined for the CD standard. So it's kind of similar to CDs. It came a good couple years later than CDs. How did Sony want to sell it? And actually, the 90s were it was a time of format wars. There were many new formats being introduced, and not a lot of them survived. And MiniDisc in particular faced a stiff competition from other products emerging on the market at that time. And Sony had to find some kind of niche or some kind of way to market this product to the users. So the two main ways was to position it as a sort of alternative to tape or to cassette players. So in this way they stress the fact that the MiniDisc is a digital audio format, so it doesn't distort your data, and you don't have to rewind your tape, you can find your song quickly, and you can store a lot of songs on a relatively small and compact factor you can take with you wherever you go. However, there was competition from different sources. I will talk about this a little bit later. And some of those were even Sony's own products that had product lines which sort of cannibalized the sales of MiniDisc as well. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline. And here I'm going to focus on Sony portables because Sony was basically the main driving force behind the format. They had the proprietary patents on it. This was the sort of the envisioned purpose of this format, to have like a portable audio format you could take with you. So 1992 was when we had the first device from the Sony MZ line, and it wasn't very portable. It was about 700 grams or 0.7 kilogram with a battery. So technically you can take it with you, but it was quite heavy. And this is 1992, and in 1984 already we had the first unit from the Sony Discman line. So this was the first portable CD player, and it was probably a bit smaller than this. So this introduced the ATRAC codec. So this was the first version of the codec. It had features such as track titling, so you could name your tracks, you could change the order of those tracks on the disc. And on battery, you would get about 2.5 hours of playback and maybe 1 hour of record time. And it was fairly, I don't actually have the MSRP price for it as it was released, but it was a fairly expensive product at the time. Couple years later, in 1995, there was sort of a refinement of this first product. Was the MZR3. It introduced the ATRAC 3 codec version. The codec is proprietary. It was eventually reverse engineered, but I suspect most of the improvements came to like psychoacoustic improvements to the encoding scheme. The device featured better editing options. It had about 4 hours of playback and 2 hours of recording, and it had shrunk quite a bit both in size and in weight. It was about 360 grams with battery, and it was about $650 at the time it was released. So if we adjust it for inflation, today it would be about $1,400. It's quite expensive for a music player. 1999 was the first kind of miniaturized recorder. So this was marketed as a jacket size recorder that you could take into your jacket pocket. It had about 12 hours of playback. It was about 150 grams of battery, and introduced a couple of additional features. It was the first device that miniaturized the optical pickup, which was about half the size of the pickup on the earlier devices. And we have some of, actually many of the devices I'll be showing here, we have them on our exhibits also. You can come over and take them into your hand and see how they work. So you can see that the devices here are kind of spread apart. The development was not particularly rapid until 1999, when Sony really started to make new devices every year. In 2000 was the MZR900, which again had improvements into this proprietary encoding scheme. Introduced what was called the LP modes, which is what I mentioned earlier. These were basically a higher compression ratio modes, so you could store twice as much audio on your MiniDisc at a lower quality. It had improved responsiveness, and we continuously see the improvement of both playback time and the reduction of weight of the device. So at this point, the device is physically not much larger than the MiniDisc itself. The MiniDisc would be about this size, but it's still a little bit thicker due to the battery and mechanical components in it. In 2001, there was a major feature added to the MiniDisc products, which was called NetMD, because you might wonder how do you put music on your MiniDisc. So let's say you have your favorite album, you have a MiniDisc blank. How do you record it? So up until 1999, what you had to do was you had to just connect a mini jack signal audio, or you could connect a Toslink optical input, and you would record music this way. But you had no easy way to put music on your mini disc, for example, from your personal computer. And this changed in 2001 with the introduction of MZN1. So this was the first device you could just plug into your computer, and Sony had, of course, its own proprietary software that you would use to copy music onto the device. So again, we see a reduction of weight, and we get about 30 hours of playback on this device. I'm going to go a little bit more quickly because those devices become, in a way, a little bit similar to each other. The format is refined to a similar form factor. So in 2002, we have a sort of reduction in price. It's still about $450 today. And you can see that they kind of all coalesce on the same physical form factor. So you have it's roughly the size of a mini disc cartridge. It has the display, about a couple of buttons. You would normally also have a remote on a cable, so you could have a remote in your pocket and use it to switch songs. We also have some on our exhibit. And new devices are released every year, but they don't really meaningfully change all that much. In 2003, we have the MZN910. We have another refinement of the ATRAC codec. We have similar features as we had before. We have an addition of an equalizer, an alarm, and some further refinements to playback time. 2004 is another big break for the mini disc format, but you might be wondering, 2004, that sounds a little bit late, right? And we'll talk about the pressure from the competition in just a moment. But in 2004, Sony realized that people wanted to really store more music on their device rather than carry a bunch of discs with them. And they introduced a high-ND format, which was a higher density and also higher capacity format for the mini disc. It was backward compatible with the regular mini discs, but you could also buy new discs, which had about 1 GB of capacity. These were also a little bit expensive on release. This was about $700 in today's US dollars. 2005, we have another high-ND capable player. This one finally breaks away with ATRAC. You could still use ATRAC for your files, but you could also play regular MP3 or WMA files or even WAV files on it. It speeds up the transfer of data from your PC, and it also enables storage of arbitrary files on your media, such as photos or data files. And this was basically the end for the format. In 2006, Sony releases the final device, the MZ-RH1, which basically is the final form. It's the final refinement of these portable devices made by Sony, including all of the features mentioned previously, as well as new design and OLED display. And these devices are really quite beautiful, and we have also a couple of them on the exhibit, so feel free to stop by and see how they feel in your hand. But at this point, the mini disc as a data storage format was sort of finished, and there was a number of reasons for it. Mini disc experienced continuous pressure from portable CD audio players, many of which released by Sony as well. As early as 1984, you had the first Discman, the D50, if I remember correctly, and this continued on towards 2010s. In 1997-8, actually, you had the first MP3 players. I would say that 98, 99 were the first commercially successful ones. And this also had a pressure on the mini disc format. Initially, the storage was small. They would have like 32 megabytes of memory. There were some devices which had like miniaturized hard drives. But the capacity of solid-state storage continued to grow, and they exerted higher pressure on Sony. They quickly commoditized, and they became quite inexpensive. Also, feature phones, and here I'm going to just mention, I think it was Nokia 55, maybe I misremember, but one of the Nokias released in 2001 had also the capacity of playing back MP3 files. So this was kind of heralding the direction that the market would take, that you would just carry a single device which had multiple functions in it. And in 2001, so this is the moment at which Sony introduced finally the ability to put files from your PC. The Apple iPod, the first generation iPod Classic launched. And well, it was a huge commercial success. You could have just a single device and have all of your music on it. This basically contributed to the downfall of the MiniDisc as a format. And Apple had multiple devices released over the years, also way into the 2010s. And also to mention 2007, the first iPhone, right? So this was basically the reality we live in today is in many ways a consequence of this product, where hardware sort of became concentrated in a single device where you would have just your smartphone, and it would have multiple functions, and you wouldn't need to carry a separate device just to listen to music. So the MiniDisc died, right? 2011, Sony announced that it wouldn't ship any more devices, any new MiniDisc devices. I think they finally stopped shipment in 2013. And partly because of the market pressures from alternative formats, and partly because the devices themselves were fairly expensive, and because the commercially released albums on MiniDisc were often also more expensive than the equivalent album on a CD, and perhaps because just the variety and choice of labels that produce MiniDiscs wasn't just as high, the consumers eventually switched to other data formats. So you could say, well, it's a failed format from the 90s, right? Well, it's too bad. But recent years, there have been a bit of a revival in the MiniDisc community. And I think there is a couple of factors which really played into this revival and why people dig out these old devices and find them in their shelves or boxes somewhere in the attic and bring them back to life. So this is sort of a subjective on my part, but why do I think the MiniDisc revival happened? I think one point was the COVID-19 pandemic, and this might seem funny to you, but this was a time when many people were stuck in their homes and they needed some kind of creative outlet. They needed some kind of hobby they could do indoors. And many people picked up chess or started building mechanical keyboards, but many people turned to the community they formed around the revival of the MiniDisc format. But why was it MiniDisc in particular? What makes MiniDisc attractive today? I think one of the reasons is commoditization of consumer electronics. And by that I mean that basically most smartphones these days look the same. They have a similar size, they have a similar form factor, they have some cameras on the back. But if you didn't know, you would have probably a hard time of telling them apart. And MiniDisc offers kind of a glimpse into a future that we never had. It shows devices that had actual buttons, that had tactile feedback, that had springs and gears inside, they kind of reminiscent of a mechanical watch. And you would press a button that would whir up to life, and you would have music playing out of your headphones. So there is an attractive kind of retro quality to MiniDisc, coupled with often a high-end design and high-end materials used for those devices. They are very pleasant to use, to hold in your hand and to look at. Then it was around that time also that came a little bit of a disillusion with streaming services, in my opinion. So people would notice that the music they stream, that they don't really own it, that the music they have access to really depends on agreements between labels. So you could listen to a song on a streaming service one day, and the next day it would be gone because some licensing deal expired. Or you would have your favorite song on YouTube, and YouTube would delete it because of some disagreement on who owns it. So there was a little bit of pushback. It was maybe a step taken too far, and some people wanted to just have music, like own it physically on a medium they could store on a shelf, and they could take it with them and put it in the device, and it would always play. So I think this is also one of the reasons that played into the revival of the format. Then also a couple years ago, I think it was the beginning of the right to repair movement. And there is a reason why I talk specifically about Sony products, because I should mention that Sony licensed the technology, and there were many other devices from Panasonic, Aiwa, Sharp, or Kenwood that could play MiniDisc. But for MiniDisc, for Sony devices specifically, we have service manuals available for majority of the portable devices. And those service manuals are very detailed. They have electrical schematics, they have the test points, they have the waveforms you should expect at those test points. You have the list of components, you have like data, like a block diagrams. And I actually have one of the service manuals printed out, so you could also browse through it at the exhibit. And I think this was also this sort of played into the MiniDisc, because the 90s were sort of at the time when electronics was beginning to become integrated, but there were still a lot of individual separate components. If you open a MiniDisc, you will see a sea of capacitors and resistors and other components. You still have some integrated circuits, of course, for the codec, etc. But it felt like you could still figure it out. If it was like, if it fell and it became dented, or you could open it up and you could maybe figure it out and fix it. There were, of course, some weak points in those devices. Not all of those devices have aged very well. So many of those devices were stored with their batteries inside, and those batteries eventually leaked. So there is often PCB damage. They were some of the first devices to use flex PCB, and depending on the particular era, those flex PCB became brittle over time, and they have the tendency to break, especially when they're connected to moving parts such as optical pickups. And there are some units have, for example, issues with early OLED displays that would dim out over time and then become invisible. But generally, you can many of those devices can be brought back to life. They can be fixed. And this also led to a growth of a kind of hacker maker community around MiniDisc. So, for example, you can buy replacement OLED displays built with modern parts, which are reverse engineered to work with particular model of your device. You can get some tools or replacement parts, or you can have 3D printed gears and other little things that can help you repair your MiniDisc and continue using it. You might be also wondering, well, okay, you can fix it, but can I still get the discs, right? Because if the Sony has stopped producing it, what's the kind of availability of discs you can use with it? And even though the production and shipment of devices stopped around 2012, 2013, Sony continued to produce blank MiniDisc for the domestic market in Japan, where it was the most popular, for many years. And I think the production of blanks stopped around 2020 or 2021. However, there is still access to basically factory new blanks that you can just buy on Amazon or import from Japan, or there's often like a group buys when someone would buy a box of these, which are was just laying in a warehouse somewhere, and share it with the community. So the media themselves are still fairly easily available, and with proper care and maintenance, you can enjoy the MiniDisc format probably for many more years to come. So at the end, I'd like to encourage you to check out the MiniDisc community, which is sort of centered around the website MiniDisc Wiki. We also have a Discord, which is very active. And we have people who just collect those devices. We have people who repair them, refurbish them. We have people who reverse engineer them, people who create mods. One popular mod would be adding Bluetooth to those MiniDisc devices, and we have several attempts at that. Or build small tools like myself that just make your life easier if you use a MiniDisc from the mid-90s or late 90s. And I would like to encourage you to stop by the MiniDisc exhibit. We have a lot of devices spanning probably 15 years of the format, from one of the bulky, clunky early ones to the most refined devices at the very end of the lifetime of the format. If you want to listen to music recorded on MiniDisc, you also have that opportunity. We'll have some live demos set up. We have a live demo set up, but Piotrek, who's going to have presentation just after me, will talk about it more detail. He did a lot of reverse engineering work on the NetMD format. But we'll have some technical problems with other live demos, but we'll set up them throughout the day. We'll be able to browse through the service manuals. I'll probably take one MiniDisc recorder apart to its basic pieces, and I'll do some maintenance on it, and then I'll put it back together, and hopefully it will still work, and more. So we're happy to share our interest and passion about those devices. So feel free to stop by and talk to us, and stick around for revealing NetMD secrets, which is coming up just after this talk. So thank you for your attention. And now if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jan, for this very interesting talk. I'll just kick off with one question. Like, how did you get into Mini? Is it like you have about the same age?
How did you hear about it, right? Because we have, when you meet people online, you don't know their age, right? And today I met some of the people like in person from the community for the first time in my life. And you have you have a lot of people in their 30s, like myself. You have some students, like engineering students who are in their 20s. You had some older people who actually lived through the history of MiniDisc. So we have people coming from different moments in their life. I personally, I think, learned about it through Reddit. There is also a active subreddit for MiniDisc, and they would also often post beautiful pictures of those devices when restored to their prime. And this also during the COVID era got me interested in the format, and I started tinkering with them. And I helped with, for example, reverse engineering the protocol which is used for communicating between the recorders and the remotes, and other little things like that. And we'll probably also have a live demo of this later. So I think we had another question here, yes?
Yes, you mentioned the MiniDisc that can be recorded. How many times can such a MiniDisc be recorded over before it becomes unusable?
Sony in their marketing materials claimed you could do 100,000 re-recordings, because you don't really damage the material. The recording is just in the magnetic layer. I personally haven't tested it, but I think it far exceeded the re-recordability of CDs.
Thank you for the talk. It was very good. I'm of the age where it was the perfect format for me when I was coming of age around 18, and I was also into student radio, so it was just a perfect format. And also I got back into it during COVID, so it's sort of fitted into everything in my life. As a revival format, I think it's perfect because it's digital native. It's got NetMD. It sounds amazing. The cassette revival is ridiculous, but MiniDisc I think is the perfect. But what I want to understand is why, because the Chinese, like AliExpress, they're making cassette mechanisms. They're still making like really cheap Discmans. Why has no one made a new player? And why has no one started making discs? Is it patents or is it the complexity?
I think it's mostly it's probably a couple of things, but I think CD format is generally more open and more defined than a MiniDisc, which is more proprietary. And basically, if you bought a CD player from Sharp or from Kenwood or from Panasonic, it would have Sony chips in it. They would have probably their own spin on the design of the device and on its remote and some of the features. Like they would maybe introduce a delta sigma amplifier or something like that. But the core of the intellectual property was Sony, and I think it hasn't been fully refined to the point where you can just emulate it, or perhaps, as you mentioned, the complexity is too high to effectively emulate it as a kind of commercial clone, so to speak.
So, sorry, I have a follow-on question then. So do you know where the core patents are for this format? Is it around the 8-track chip? Because I would have thought the physical format itself would be more
Yes.
borrowed from CD, so they're probably open
Yeah,
now.
the ATRAC, I think the patent expired already, but for many years it was definitely sort of the intellectual property. For example, the protocol that I helped reverse engineer was also patented. It was called by Sony, I think it was called the time shared bus or something like that. So there was a lot of patents sprinkled around it, and I think it made it difficult. And Sony is generally quite eager to litigate, in my opinion. So I think there was a little bit of pushback to trying to reinvent it before the patents really expired. And would anyone try to create a new mini disc player from scratch? Maybe, I don't know, but I would encourage them.
Thank you.
Am I right in saying that the MiniDisc was the first format where the jog skipping technology was put in? The
That's
buffering,
right.
if you like, before portable CDs.
That's
and
right.
That should have been a big selling point.
I haven't mentioned it, but you're absolutely correct that MiniDisc, one of its marketing kind of advantage, even for the very first devices in 1992, was the shock-proof memory. So it would be able to store. Initially, it was maybe 10 seconds, later extended to almost 2 minutes of data, where it would be invulnerable to just the device shaking in your pocket and the optical head skipping a track or something like that. And this was later kind of, I think, introduced from the MiniDisc into the CD players that Sony also made, and these also became marketed as having some kind of shockproof memory.
I still have a MiniDisc player in my car, an old car I have, and I have a MiniDisc changer in the trunk. And that will change the MiniDisc to the next one seamlessly, so it continues to play by memory the current one while it's loading up the second one. Neat, very nice.
You mentioned the patent prolongation, but has Sony created a cause with the 2010 stock life?
Sorry, can you repeat?
You mentioned patents on litigation,
Right.
But has Sony actually litigated or even threatened to do so since the 2010s?
I don't think so. I think they've probably lost interest since it was a commercial failure for them. But I don't really know enough to answer this question.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a commercial failure? Did they make no profit from it?
It's not that it incurred losses for Sony, but it hasn't. They marketed as they wanted to create a niche somewhere between the tapes, the digital audio tape, and the CDs. And the niche maybe existed for a while, but then it disappeared, and Sony wasn't quick enough to adapt. It took them a long time to introduce the NetMD protocol to transfer files from PC. They were reluctant to support MP3 until it was too late, and basically they invested probably a lot of resources into developing marketing the format, and it just wasn't enough to adapt to kind of shifting customer perception and the arrival of the MP3 players, which eventually became commoditized and much cheaper, or the more high-end products like the Apple iPod.
Okay, thank you very much. Then just stay here and in just a few minutes we have our next talk on cracking or reverse engineering the protocol. Thank you.